how did AFS get started in Dixon? The first family, the late Mr. and Mrs. Art Woodman, warm people who were naturally attracted to young people, introduced American Field Service Program to Dixon in 1956. The Woodmans shared their home for 2 years with 2 different exchange students from lands and made their stay in Dixon memorable. Art, as many of his friends have said, recognized the potential in Dixon for sharing experiences, homes, and situations in an effort to realize the long-term values of mutual understanding. A small community such as Dixon, the Woodmans felt, offers to young people of other communities some of the basic values and qualities of the people in this country. In Dixon, they saw a wealth of personal and individual warmth, a sharing that could be communicated. On an individual basis, when a person can put faces to the news events of the day, a better understanding of the situation is possible. When people return to their homes after living abroad, for example, crisis news items are better comprehended when one knows something about the people. And that apparently was, the Woodmans were all about that. Art, once he started the Dixon chapter of AFS, continued his efforts until his death in 1971. And during these years served more than 10 years as an area representative of AFS. Art always got very emotional about AFS. A friend confided at chapter meetings when asked to talk about AFS, tears would well up in his eyes. He thought so deeply about the program. It was a touching experience. Following his death, the community established in his honor the Art Woodman Scholarship Fund for AFS. Thank you.
I'm here to give 2 presentations. First of all, of a student who stayed with the Woodmans, Merrill Brown, who came from England. And I might try to do it in a British accent. Dear Dixon friends, thanks for the opportunity to tell you how much my stay in Dixon meant to me. Coming from a tiny village, 30 houses in England, I would never have dreamt of it. I was still at high school in Toaster as head girl when my older sister at college wrote that a college friend of hers had been an AFSer in the United States for a year. And the question, what about you? Well, I went to school that day, and the principal called me in as head girl to hang up a letter on our notice board with details about how to apply for an AFS exchange year. Always a strong believer in coincidences, I wrote an application that day. To my great surprise, I got an invitation to the United States Embassy in London. I had only been to London once many years before with my parents, and now I had to prepare a speech and catch a train to Grosvenor Square alone, age 16. Was I scared? But I managed to get there and was interviewed by the United States ambassador himself. And to my great surprise, I was accepted. And later I got a letter from Art and Mary Jean Woodman saying they would be my parents for the year. Then the excitement started. I had to travel to Dover and cross to Amsterdam to board a boat called the Arosa Sky to take all the European students to New York. Made lots of friends, I'm still in contact with some. And once we were on our way, a Greek student became ill. So when we arrived in New York, they made us stay for 10 days in quarantine outside the harbor until most of us were infected. Then they flew us to our various destinations. Myself in a drafty old airplane to San Francisco. Art and Mary Jean Woodman were there waiting for me, the best surrogate parents you could imagine, to take me to Dixon, where Art Secretary Ruth Peterson and Victor, their dog, were also waiting for us. And I was promptly ill. But their dog insisted on sleeping on my bed to keep me company. So I missed the start of school as Art and Mary Jean took me on a short break afterwards down to L.A. When we returned, the first people I met, apart from the principal, were Marva Lutjes, Glenda Fry, Pat Wolfe, and Joyce Rogers. I was overwhelmed, and then we were all good friends, and shortly later I met Arlie Tim. During the year, the AFS also arranged meetings in other places where we met other students, and that was great fun to meet other people from the boat. My year at Dixon High School was exciting as I made lots of other students, as well also from the junior years I took classes in American history, and one of those students was Lauren Bennett, whose mother helped Mary Jean as the librarian at Dixon Library. Later, he came to Celle in Germany as an AFSer, and we have kept in touch all these years. He recently moved east to be closer to his daughters. The AFS meant a great deal to all of us as we learned how it was actually to live, how it was to actually live in the United States, and really how small the world is. Going to the junior prom, Art and Mary Jean made Lauren and I leave much too early so as not to be late. So we decided to park in one of the side streets and just talk, only to be interrupted by Ruth Peterson's husband, who was a policeman, who wanted to know what we were doing and said he'd been told to keep an eye on us. But it was a great evening anyway. Coming from a small village, I found it great fun to be able to walk around Dixon, talk to the shopkeepers, and go into the English Hills. Once I visited Arlie, and we went out for an early morning ride. Not that I could really ride, and I promptly slid off the back end when it increased its pace going uphill. There are so many stories I could tell, including blotting my copybook at the end when some of the lads of my class I knew well said, "Come for a ride in the English Hills. You've never seen anything yet." So I guiltily said yes, and we went up a very narrow track into the hills and had to pull in to let someone pass, and our car rolled backwards and jammed against a rock sticking out. It took us a really long time to get the car out, and when we got back, the Woodmans were at the Petersons for a farewell meal, so the lads had to come in with me rather crestfallen. For that reason, no names have been mentioned. There are so many things to remember. Even though I'll be 85 in a couple of weeks, it is all as clear as if it were yesterday. I'm talking about coincidences. Once, Art and Mary Jean took me down to Long Beach to meet Mary Jean's sister. While having lunch on the way, an unknown woman came rushing up to our table to ask if she could have the vacant seat. Unheard of, really, as I had discovered, as one has to wait to be seated in the United States. And I found she was probably responsible for me being there. Her AFS daughter guest had been a guest a couple years previously, was my sister's college friend, who told Gwen, my sister, all about the program. What a coincidence. Now, living in Dixon was a completely different world. I met so many great people, was a member of the Rainbow Girls, visited Arlie on their ranch, and rode a pony over the hills just as the sun was rising. I joined the art classes and met so many different people. AFS also gave us the chance to meet up with other foreign students to travel further north, to introduce the AFS program to others. A very valuable experience, especially as the trend today seems to be the opposite. I often remember the AFS saying, "Walk together, talk together, O ye people of the world, for then and only then shall we have peace." How true. If places like Dixon remember to open their hearts to people from other countries, and the AFS can keep up its good work, it will make a huge difference in the world. I became a teacher and fell in love with Manfred, an exchange student from southern Germany. And we moved to Germany. I got a job with the Hudson Stocking Factory in Stuttgart without speaking more than 2 words of German, and I picked it up along the way. We married, and our 3 boys and a girl, our 4 children, and 5 grandchildren, are now scattered widely. My sister went to Canada to teach, fell in love, and was married about 2 months later and founded a widespread clan. and none of this would probably have happened without our early experience of getting to know and enjoy a completely different way of life. Dear Dixonites, I wish you all the best for the future. Keep up your good work and your open minds to receiving strangers from all over the world. It enriches all of us and the world. I went through my photo album, all taken with an exceedingly primitive camera, and I'm sending a number of photos of as many classmates and others at school events that might be interesting. And when I arrived, I said I was introduced to Lauren Bennett and was strictly told he was to be my official companion. Fortunately, we got on well and still have contact. Wishing you all the best, your former guest and perhaps classmate, Merrill Brown, now Merrill Zepf. So she mentioned her friend, her colleague for that year was Lauren Bennett. Lauren himself was a foreign exchange student in Celle, Germany. And I'm going to read, not quite all of this. He goes into a lot of detail about his actual travel to Europe and his travel back from Europe, which I'll just summarize. But I'll tell you in particular about his time in Europe. In my junior year of high school, Dixon had an English foreign exchange student, Merrill Brown, as part of our American Field Service program. I was asked to be her escort for a dance when she first arrived. She was a senior, but we were the same age. I ended up being her escort for the year, and we became good friends. I think because of that involvement in the AFS program, I was asked to be our exchange student for the summer of 1958, between my junior and senior years. I was assigned to the Spierig family in Celle, Germany. They had a 15-year-old son, Jochen, a name I never learned to pronounce. I ended up calling him John. To get to Germany, I was to sail on a chartered Holland-America line ship from Montreal, Canada to Rotterdam, Holland. I was to get myself up to Montreal. I wanted to go by train, but at that time, railroads were trying to get out of the passenger business. So even though I pleaded strongly to see whether I could make a train journey, I was basically told no, it was not possible. And I ended up taking a trip by Greyhound bus from Sacramento all the way to Montreal. And it is quite a lot of description here about how he stopped here, stopped there, sat next to a sailor who told him lots of stories he never believed. But the most interesting thing I think of all is that on this journey, he lost his luggage. He was not reconnected with his luggage until September when he came back to the United States. So he did mention that when he was on the ship, he was having, without luggage, to wash his underwear and socks every single day. But in the end, they made it. He also got a little bit sick early on the trip, the sea trip, but he said it was more the flu than seasickness. He said he felt fine, but he enjoyed the experience. Then eventually on June the 19th, from the boat, he saw England. There are lots of ships in sight as we enter the English Channel. We anchored just offshore of a small town for the night. On Friday morning, I could see a castle on a hill in some woods. I wanted to go ashore so bad I could taste it. It was so pretty, and so much like Merrill Brown had described it. At about 9:30 in the morning, we weighed anchor and headed into Le Havre in France, arriving about 4 in the afternoon. I could see into the city, and a busy street was right next to the docks. I saw lots of bicycles and kinds of cars I'd never seen before, not one of them an American car. On Saturday the 21st, I was on deck at 7:30 in the morning. We had already entered the new waterway into Rotterdam. The water was a lot higher than the land. It seemed as if we were sailing up in the air, and we had a great view of the Dutch countryside. I saw lots of Dutch houses and a few windmills. We docked and got off the ship at around 10:30 in the morning and were loaded into a chartered train waiting right beside the ship. We left immediately and went straight across Holland. I saw power equipment and horses working side by side on the farms, and the farms were small. We crossed the Rhine and arrived in Düsseldorf at 3:30 in the afternoon. We had a layover about 3 hours before our next train, so we had snacks in the restaurant and changed our money to Deutschmarks, 4.2 marks to the dollar at the time. Our next train went to Hanover, and kids began getting off at various stops. There were 4 of us getting off in Celle, myself, George, James Crichton, and Pamela Hansen. And we got to Celle on nearly midnight on June the 21st. I met my host family, the Spierigs, and we walked from the train station to their home. Their son, Jochen, was 15. When we got to their home, I had 2 Dixon newspapers waiting for me. I was disappointed, though, I didn't get a letter from home. I took a bath and went to bed. Celle was a small, pretty city that had escaped the bombing in World War II. A large part of the town was old, with beautiful old buildings of large beams and bricks. It had lots of parks and one tall church steeple that you could climb to the top of and get a spectacular view of the city and the Aller River. Celle was in the English sector at the time. After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 sectors: the English, the French, the American, and the Russian sectors. The Russian sector was walled off in Berlin, and there was a fence and a plowed no man's land around the rest of it. There was a British military post in Celle and a British movie theater. We went to several movies there, and it was interesting that they always played the British national anthem with a picture of Queen Elizabeth II on the screen before the movie started. For activities, we went kayaking, bicycling, and swimming. Kayaking was great fun on little, narrow, deep streams through a level forest with little underbrush. It was a planted forest, but pretty, and I enjoyed it. We often got together with George, James, and Pamela and their host kids for activities. Jochen was 15, and he was not social. I think he'd envisioned having a brother for the summer who shared all his interests and would be the friend he didn't seem to have locally. He didn't enjoy activities, and he soon began to complain about how things were going. I wasn't mature enough to understand what the problem was, and I was having problems of my own. My lost suitcase made things difficult, and my letters home were unanswered. And it was July the 1st before I got my first letter from home, and I really didn't say anything. I probably wasn't good company. During the summer, I had a chance to tour the Volkswagen assembly plant. We visited a section on the border between East and West Germany, a rural area, and the border was a high wire fence with a wide plowed strip on the eastern German side. This was called a no man's land because if you were caught in it, you could be shot. The Spierig family took me to visit their relatives in Hanover and Hamburg, and I saw areas that were still being rebuilt after being bombed into rubble during World War II. As the summer went on, Jochen got more and more unhappy with me and complained to me often. I tried to placate him, but didn't know what to do. I got more and more miserable until finally on July 31st I went to Mrs. Jessen, Pamela's host mother, and told her all about it. I was only expecting some advice. Instead, she called Hasso von Petersdorf, who had been an exchange student in California, and arranged for me to stay with his family the rest of the summer, starting immediately. It was a wonderful change for me. The von Petersdorfs lived in a rural village just outside Celle. They had a cow and chickens, and there was a short bus ride into Celle where I could meet my friends. The family was genuinely nice, and James Crichton joined me because of the problems he was having with his host family. I helped with farm chores and was free to go and come as I pleased. So from August 1st until the 21st of August, I had a good time with the von Petersdorf family and the AFS friends in Celle. One morning, Hasso and Mr. von Petersdorf took Jim and me to the river just before sunrise and blew traditional horns to greet the sunrise. It was a pretty sound and an old German tradition. The von Petersdorf house was built in 1596 in a typical Lower Saxony style. It was used as animal quarters until it was converted into a home in 1928. On August 21st, we boarded a train to Hanover to meet up with the AFS train to Bremen. We each spent the night with a German family. My family was Mr. and Mrs. Baas, their 17-year-old daughter named Ingrid, and their 15-year-old son. They had a 1950 Mercedes, and it was nice to stay overnight with them. The next morning, we all met and toured the city on buses. We had lunch on the townhouse that met at America House for a party and then had dinner. We took a streetcar to a concert. The streetcar derailed, so we had to change streetcars. I enjoyed the concert and was tired and ready for bed when I got back to my host family house at 11 o'clock at night. Saturday and Sunday were filled with tours, lunches, and dinners. On August 25th, we boarded a train to Rotterdam, where we boarded the Johann von Oldenbarnevelt, the flagship of the Holland-America line. The ship sailed at 4:10 p.m. Before the ship sailed, we were asked to turn in all the souvenirs that had been stolen from the train. I was happy that I hadn't been guilty of that. Then he talks about how on his trip back, he went past the English Channel, saw the cliffs of Dover. Apparently, when they were in the middle of the ocean, the ship's motor cooling system cracked and the engines were shut down. And during this time, apparently, one of the AFS students decided to go through a porthole to take a swim in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That student was arrested and confined to a cabin for the rest of the trip. So the captain probably also had nightmares about having all these 16 and 17-year-olds jumping into the ocean for a swim. He then woke up. He woke up one time right in the middle of the night. And he said it was an amazing sight because he saw in the distance 4 smokestacks suddenly lit up several miles away. And it was the Queen Mary sailing for England from New York City. And he remembers coming to New York and seeing the Statue of Liberty. And then on his journey back, he actually took an airplane back, but he had to try to get to the airplane first. And there was a lot of back and forth, so he had spent some time in New York, climbed up got to the top of the Empire State Building. He tried to hitchhike to Washington, D.C., but was picked up by the police because hitchhiking was illegal there. He ended up going back in New York, Grand Central Station. He saw a movie being made at Grand Central Station called North by Northwest and found himself within 5 feet of Cary Grant and Alfred Hitchcock. But when he watched the movie, he said none of Grand Central Station scenes were in it. So he said, I probably ruined them. He then made his way back by airplane to, first of all, to Burbank, and then he got back to Dixon, and he said in late September, his suitcase was eventually found in Chicago and was returned to him. So that is Lauren's story.
Well, thank you for sharing about both of those students. And I'm going to pass around the article about the Woodmans, so if you'd like to take a closer look. On the back side, you'll see some pictures of past AFS students in Dixon. And so I've been tasked to share a little bit about a list that my mom and I compiled. One list has all of the Dixon students who studied abroad over the years, and the other list are all the Dixon host families who welcome students into their home. And on Facebook, when I posted the announcement for today, I received some comments that I wanted to share with you by some past students. The first one is a comment by Greg Cook, who in 1974 spent a summer in Montevideo, Uruguay, in South America. And this is his quote: "It changed my life forever. I am forever grateful to the Dixon AFS chapter for giving me that opportunity." And then another quote came in from Chris Sugar, who spent a school year, 1974 as well, spent a school year in South Africa. And he said, "So glad to have had that year as part of my memories. Priceless." So I'm going to pass this around. Oh, there was one more. There was a comment, okay, a student who came to Dixon from England in 1970 to 1971. His name was David Terry from England, and he lived with the Mel Kleberger family. And he said he played soccer, and his coaches were Ed Eusebio and Neil Rodeville. So I'll pass these around as well. So this lovely lady has traveled all the way from Yuba City, and she is the current AFS coordinator who connects students with host families. And I'm going to let her get set up, and I will continue sharing a little bit about my journey with AFS. Before I do that, I received another message through Facebook from Katrina Coelho, and Katrina was in school with me and Catlin, and also Lisa. And Katrina and her husband, Katrina grew up here in Dixon. She and her husband currently live in Rio Vista, and she and her husband and their 2 children, they have welcomed 3 different students over the years. So they had 1 student from Argentina, 1 from Denmark, and 1 from Italy. What's her name now? You probably know. What is Katrina's married name? Well, think of it. You probably know her. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know her married name. Yeah, So what she wanted to share, she's sick, and so she was planning to be here. Bradley? Spradling. Okay. Yes. So all 3 of their students came back for Katrina's daughter's wedding. And she sent some wonderful pictures, and you see all 3 of the students together. So it's pretty special. So as I read, this experience is life-changing. And for me, it all started in 1984. My cousins and my aunt and uncle in Winters, so my dad's older brother, Terry Schroeder, and his family welcomed a student from Finland, 1984 to 85. And her name is Maria Seire, and she's from Finland. And what happened was my cousin Carrie, who is my same age, was not available to go to the state fair. So my Aunt Linda called and said, would you like to go to the state fair with Maria and meet our new exchange student? I said, sure. And we just hit it off. And she and I became great friends the entire year. And to this day, we still stay in touch. When my husband Kelly and I go to Europe, we visit all 3. We visit Maria, we visit Trina, who lived with us here in Dixon the next year, and then my host family. So what Maria taught me was that despite where we grow up, we're all the same. And that was an eye-opener for me to know that I could meet someone from all the way across the world, and she could have the same feelings, happy feelings, sad feelings, the same experiences. And it was just such an eye-opener for me. We became such good friends, and at the very end of 1985, I had the opportunity to go on a youth 4-H program to Washington, D.C. as the representative from Solano County, but it meant leaving 4 days before Maria returned home. And I was crying, and I can't leave, but I did, and we still talk about that to this day. And then Kelly and I went out to her wedding in 1997. She was married in Helsinki. And now she currently lives in Monaco with her husband, who is from England, and they have 1 son. And she and her husband and son have visited us here in Dixon several times. So we still keep in touch. And then my second experience was, well, Maria was so wonderful, and what a great opportunity to have an AFS cousin. I'd like to host a student now. And so I begged my parents many times and finally got them to say yes. And so we hosted Trina Hansen from Denmark, and Catlin knows Trina, and Lisa knows Trina. And my mom was working at UC Davis at the time, full-time. So my dad and I, we made a welcome sign, And we drove down to the San Francisco airport, and we held it up, "Welcome to America," and Trina Hansen, and we met. And then my dad and I took her to Spangler's restaurant in Berkeley, and we had seafood, and she noticed that there was a soda machine, and it had Hansen soda. And she said, "Look it, my name is on that soda." And then my dad told her a silly joke about seafood and that every food he sees, he eats. And she didn't understand it at first. You know, her English was quite good, but she didn't joke. But today, to this day, we still laugh about that. So we still see her. We've been Mark to visit her, and she's been out with her parents to Dixon several times. And something about that experience was, it was my first time having a sister because I have one older brother. And I was able to learn what it's like to share a room, share clothes, drive together to school in my dad's 62 Chevy Bel Air. Just all kinds of new experiences opened up for me, and it taught me to share. And sometimes, we were like real sisters. Sometimes we got along great, and sometimes we would have our issues and argue, but then we would be friends again. And she truly was like a real sister. When she left, I'll never forget the day she boarded the bus to go to Los Angeles for an orientation where all the students attend before they return to their home countries. And I remember that my dad and I were crying so hard. My mom, we all were crying. And my dad and I walked all around the farm, 10 acres, and we just kept circling for hours and just crying and crying. And, you form such deep bonds, and it's like someone has passed away, when they leave. But the nice thing is we still keep in touch and we still visit. So then after that experience, I said, well, now I'd like to live abroad. And so I applied, and I used my gap year because I had graduated from Dixon High School. So before going on to university, I had this gap year that I took. And so I applied to AFS, and they selected Belgium for me. And they selected the northern half, which is Dutch-speaking. The southern half is French-speaking. So I lived in Heistoptenberg, and I remember that all the U.S. students had to go to New York for an orientation. And so when I was saying goodbye to my own parents, it was the hardest thing ever. Crying. I got to New York, and I said, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm leaving home for the first time ever for 11 months. I don't think I can do this. And I cry. I called home 3 times, and I said, please put me on the plane. I have to come home. I cannot do this. And my mom had the wisdom to tell me, look, just try 1 month. And if after 1 month you want to come home, not a problem. But just at least try 1 month. Okay, I can do 1 month. I'll see you in a month. And so as soon as I got to Belgium, everything changed. I was so fascinated with all the brick buildings. Everything was brick. They had this really funky pop music going on in the bus. And I was like, this is kind of neat. I think I could like Europe. I learned Dutch. Well, when I first met my family, it was interesting because in Belgium, you don't hug. What you do is you give 3 cheek kisses, and you start to the right. And so I'm meeting my host father, 3 cheek kisses. My host mother, 3 cheek kisses. My host sister, 3 cheek kisses. And I thought, okay, I'm in for a year of lots of learning. I learned things like, we had an orientation, 2 weeks, where they taught us some basics of the Dutch language. And so my host family, my host father spoke perfect English, and my host sister, her English was also quite good. My host mom, however, did not know a word of English. So I was okay in the beginning, but when it was just she and I, we had to get out our dictionaries, use gestures, point, facial gestures, nodding, because I didn't know Dutch and she didn't know English. So it was very interesting. Now she's taken English and speaks it quite well. But I told my host father, only speak English to me for 1 month. And then after 1 month, I don't want to hear another word of English because I'm here to learn your language. Well, he wanted to practice his English. So after a month, I told him in Dutch, the limited Dutch I knew, I said, ik spreek geen Engels. Ik spreek geen Engels. And I said, I don't speak English, sorry, I don't understand you. And finally he stopped. And my Dutch is a little rusty now, but I do go back and visit them quite often now with Kelly, and they hang out quite a lot as well. I dreamt in Dutch, that was exciting. So I would say after 2.5 months, I could understand almost everything in conversation, but my speaking was still limited. But after about 6 months, I could hold my own in a conversation. In dreaming, I would say it was around that same time. I would say about 4 to 6 months. Yeah, so that was, I learned how to eat with a fork and knife. You don't cut your meat and switch hands. You just keep your fork in your left hand. And then when you finish, everybody does the same. They put their fork and knife, they angle it. I mean, and there's this protocol and etiquette that you see over in Europe that's just amazing. Nutella chocolate spread was unheard of in the United States, and I love that for breakfast. That was great. Best chocolate and beer in the world in Belgium. I rode my bike to school every day, and it took me 30 minutes one way, riding over cobblestones. One time I fell over right in front of my classmates, but I got back up. And then I learned to play drums in Belgium. I did a bike tour. Oh, Belgians iron everything. They iron socks, they iron towels, they iron underwear, they iron, you name it, they iron it. Blue jeans. Everything is clean over there. Alles proper, my host mom would say. Alles proper, everything is proper and clean. And I learned that you wear the same outfit for 3 days, and then you change your outfit. So I was used to growing up here, where you change your outfit every day in the 80s. And when I got there, I did that, and I went to school, and the students were looking at me like, she's weird. She wears a different outfit to school every day. And then I noticed that, and I asked my host family, I said, I think I might be doing something wrong because people are looking at me funny. She goes, well, you really, our tradition here is you wear the same outfit 3 days in a row, and then you change. So I started doing that, and it was fine. So it's just little things that you learn. And so I have pictures of Maria from Finland. I have Trina from Denmark, and then my host family, which I'll pass around. These are recent pictures of some of our visits. So they go back maybe 10 years. And then I also have, this was a nice book that my classmates put together as a goodbye gift for me with pictures and little messages. And I'll pass that around. And then lastly, I have this picture, which one of my cousins from the family, from my host family, made for me. And it has the Belgian flag. It has a beer, which in Belgium, they have hundreds and hundreds, and for every beer, you have a different glass. And then the frieten, which are the French fries, which is very, very popular. So I'll pass that around so you can see that. So, well, that's enough about my experiences. I'm going to turn this over now to Are you ready, Carol? Okay.
Yes. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm sorry about being late, but I have a health issue. My son's a quadriplegic, but he's also a teacher and athletic director at River Valley High School, and he had an accident 8 years ago. So I'm his main caregiver, and Sunday mornings are very busy. Okay.
And we're glad you're here.
Yeah. I will, yeah, I can use the microphone. Could you set me up with this flash drive? Where did, okay. In terms of my background with AFS, when I was in high school, I grew up in Taft, down by Bakersfield. And we had one AFS student every year, and one of our students got to go every year. And while I was in high school, all of the students who went, it was on a summer program, not the full year. That's just what they chose. But it was very impactful, especially my senior year. We had a girl named Quang, and her full name was Ho Thi Quang, but in Vietnam, your last name is really your first name. And so she came over, and it was 67, 68, and it was the year of the Tet Offensive. She was from the city of Hue, which was one of the main cities that got attacked in that Tet Offensive. And it just, at the time, the Vietnam War was way over there. I was a senior in high school. I kind of knew one or two people that might have gone, to fight, but not real well. And it just brought everything home, personal. And I think that's what AFS does. You learn about the world, you learn about world events, and it's a personal connection, not something that is in the news way over there. Eventually, though, and you're in Solano County, you might kind of find this interesting. She came back in 1971 and went to Chico State, majored in banking, and her plan was to go back to Vietnam and go into banking and be a bank manager. Well, when she graduated, it was 1975, and South Vietnam had ceased to exist. The communists had taken over. So her friends and family said, don't come back if you can help it. Just stay over there, and, So she did. She worked in the Glenn County Administrative Office for a while, went to work in the Shasta County Administrative Office, and then ended up in the Solano County Administrative Office and worked her way up to Assistant County Administrator, retiring in 2009. Now, I didn't know what had happened to her for sure. I had heard that she ended up back in the United States, but I wasn't sure. And then last fall, one of my AFS friends was wearing not this T-shirt, but a different type of AFS T-shirt, shopping in Vacaville, and this lady walks up to her and says, "Oh, AFS. I was an exchange student with AFS." And so my friend was saying, "Oh, okay, where did you go?" And she said, "I went to this small town called Taft." And my friend knows me well enough, she thought, "Oh, I think that's where Carol was." So she called me up right there in the store and said, "You'll never guess what happened." And sure enough, it was Quang. And so she put me on the phone. We exchanged our numbers and emails. And then about a month later, we met for lunch one day at Maria's Cantina in Woodland. And my sister, who lives in Woodland, came, and another classmate of ours who lives over near St. Helena also came, and we sat there for 2.5 hours. And, it was just, wow. So she talked about how, her life had changed, and she couldn't go back, and then she did go back. She's been back several times since then, but, she ended up staying here, and anyway, you never know where AFS is going to pop up. Okay. And then I continued on as a volunteer. In the 1970s, I taught at Pierce High School, and Bobby Greenwood and Rominger, I forgot her first name, came up and started a chapter with some parents and students at Pierce High. And I said, oh, I know about AFS, I'll help. And so I became the club advisor at our school. And then I got married in '80 and moved over to Yuba City. Oh, Yuba Sutter has a chapter, and they've had it since the 1950s. So I started volunteering then. And as a teacher, I could promote AFS, particularly the study abroad programs, in my classes. And when my kids were little, I didn't do a whole lot. But then starting in the 90s, I got more active in AFS. Now, like Kim had said, back in the day, when you applied to AFS, you didn't pick your country. You sent in your application in the fall, and in the spring, you found out where you were going to go. Same thing with hosting. You would send out your host family application in the fall, and in the spring, they would send you information about the student you were going to host, whatever country that happened to be. I don't know what the magic was that they worked when they were doing all the shuffling and with the papers in New York, but it seemed to work most of the time. And then by the 1990s, they had changed to where American students going abroad could pick their country, and host families could also select their student from several that would be shown to them. Nowadays, with technology the way it is, you can go on the AFS website and see short descriptions of, this time of the year, hundreds of students, and see which one sounds like a good match for your family. We are still a volunteer-based organization, and that is big in terms of exchange students. In the 70s and 80s, other organizations popped up, mainly because of hosting and the money that was involved in hosting. They have paid representatives that represent a certain area, and who knows how many students they might try to place. But we're still volunteers, much like being a Little League baseball coach, you don't get paid. Or a Sunday school teacher, you don't get paid. But you do those things because you have a passion for them, and you think it's worth your time. So nowadays, like I said, it's vastly different. What I'm going to show you right now is a PowerPoint for my presentations in the fall for asking American students if you want to go abroad. What are your options? Okay, so this is going to be a short one, and I'll go through it rather quickly too. Let's see if we can get this up. Okay, so here we have someone getting ready to go on a journey. The yellow luggage tags are still used. Okay. Anyone who's gone on an AFS journey, you get yellow luggage tags, and they stand out. Back in World War I, AFS started as an ambulance service for the Allies during the war. When World War I, by the way, I was a history teacher. When World War I started, the Germans invaded Belgium and France, and the British came over to help, but the United States didn't get involved. It was 2.5 years before we finally declared war and got involved. But there were some Americans in Paris working connected with a hospital, and they asked the Allies, what can we do to help? Because the Germans are coming. I mean, they literally went right through Belgium and into France. And so the Allies said, you can be ambulance drivers and go out to the field and help the wounded and bring in the wounded to the hospitals. And that's what they did. So they became known as the American Field Service, going out to the fields. So during World War I, they helped out in that capacity. Once the war was over, then they more or less disbanded. But along comes World War II 20 years later, and some of them are still alive and wanted to help again. again, we did not get involved right away. It was over 2 years before Pearl Harbor was bombed, but the war had been going on in Europe and also in Japan. So during that time, these drivers upped again and helped out in North Africa, and also over in India and Burma area. And then after D-Day, they came in through Normandy and France and helped actually liberate one of the concentration camps, Bergen-Belsen. So this picture up here at the top is the ambulance drivers from World War I. Now, after World War II was over, these ambulance drivers got together and said, we've had these two horrible, horrible wars during our lifetime. What could we do to help prevent another one? Because as we went along following the troops, we realized that the people were all just the same. You know, you want a peaceful life, you want a prosperous life, you want a happy life. You don't want to go out and have a war and kill people and have to leave your home and everything. So they decided that they would help promote that peace by bringing students from Europe to the United States to live and go to school for a year, and then go back home to help rebuild their countries and spread the word about their experience. And of course, at that time, several governments in Europe were still trying to get back organized, possibly as a democracy instead of a fascist dictatorship. And so they were learning about democracy at the same time and taking that back with them too. So 1947 is when the first AFS students came to the United States, and then it was the early 50s before American students could go abroad, and they were only gone for a summer because people in mainly Europe, because that was the countries involved at that time, you know, they were still recovering from the war and not in a position to host a student for a whole year. So it started out as summer programs for Americans. And then it just kept growing and growing. In the 1970s, AFS changed its format to where students from one country, we call them AFS partners, by the way, because we're all connected with AFS, say from AFS Argentina, could go to AFS Japan and not the United States. So as of the 1970s, we became more of an international organization to exchange around the world, not just with the United States. Okay, so on this second picture, you can't see because they don't have outlines on these. Okay, this is actually a ship, and back in the day, the American students would go to Europe on a ship and be there about a week, and that's when they would have their orientation. Did you go on a ship? No, you were later. You didn't go on a ship. Okay. My friend in high school did, though. And so, and then, so anyway, that died out eventually, and they started using more airplanes. And then this is a girl from Norway and Dr. Martin Luther King and his wife. And I'm not sure what the situation is, but the picture was in there. And then this is probably in the 60s, AFS kids at a rally. And at the end of their stay, they would take a bus trip from their local hosted location back to Washington, D.C. or to New York, and stop in one or two different communities for 3 or 4 days and learn about that community and then continue on. By any chance, did Dixon ever have a bus stop that you know? Okay. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, when that died out, oh gosh, probably the 90s maybe, early 2000s, because the kids, you know, with technology nowadays and everything is so instant, once they get on that bus, they just wanted to go home. They couldn't really focus on seeing new things and what this new community was like, or what this new host family that's only going to have me for 3 days would be like. So the bus trip is no longer. Okay, And then our mission statement works toward a more just and peaceful world by providing international and intercultural learning experiences to individuals, families, schools, and communities through a global volunteer partnership. Now, we do have paid staff, and they handle all the paperwork and all the communication among the countries and stuff, but we're volunteers, okay, at the local level. Okay, now we're going to hit that right there. Okay, this is a group of students who were here in our area last year. We had 15. Pre-pandemic, we used to host 28 to 31 every year. And then after the pandemic, it just got reduced because a lack of, people wanting to host. That's the biggest drawback. And anyway, so here's our 14 that were here last year. And cross-section. This year, we have 14. And actually this year, we have more boys than girls, which I can't remember the last time that happened. The other thing that's different, in the 90s, AFS changed their organization from being chapters. Now, back in the 90s, Dixon was a chapter, and it was a chapter, okay? And nowadays, we have area teams because the chapters began to die off. And part of that might have been because more women were going back to work. Back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of women didn't, and so they had time to spend on things like AFS volunteering. But the chapters began to die off, and so AFS had a huge reorganization, and we are now an area team. In our case, we go from Chico to Rio Vista and from Fairfield to Reno. That's our area team. So these kids were all hosted within that boundary. The other thing is, we call ourselves, the name is Silver and Gold, because we're the gold part of California from the gold rush, and Nevada is the silver state and had the Comstock lode, the silver rush, okay? And that was in the Reno area. So we thought Silver and Gold was a good name for our area team. Okay, so we're the Silver and Gold area team. Okay, next we go there. Okay, now this is, like I said, a presentation to encourage students to go and their parents. Okay, I'm going to kind of whip through here. Learn about a culture firsthand, gain a new perspective, stand out on college applications, learn a new language. You'll have the adventure of a lifetime, and you'll make friends from around the world. And then I reference that last picture. These kids are from very, very many different countries, and you meet together 3 or 4 times a year, plus you might get together occasionally with 1 or 2 of them for other things too. Okay? Where can you go? Okay, we still have about 40 countries that AFS students from here can go to. Europe, mostly Europe, but they aren't very big countries. Okay, Africa, Egypt, Ghana, and Kenya. And Asia and the Pacific, okay? China, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Japan, New Zealand, Thailand. And I think Malaysia's on there too now. I try to have this updated every fall, and I'll send it to a staff person in New York and say, hey, can you check this out? Okay. Okay, the right program for you. Students can go for a year. Okay, or a semester. And again, the students choose which they want to do. You can go for a summer. There's 4 to 8 week programs, and there's also 2 to 3 week programs. Oh, and then the 18 plus, you can go for a gap. Not all countries will accept high school grads, but quite a few still will. Okay. And the United States doesn't like to accept high school grads either because so many schools, we can't host a graduate. They're just going to party all the time. So most high schools, well, I can't say that. A lot of high schools will not accept a grad. I know in Yuba City we will, or we have in the recent past, but a lot of schools will have it written into their district policy that they won't take a grad or someone who is 18 at arrival. And some school districts won't take semester students, only a year. Okay, requirements. 14, there's only like 1 or 2 summer programs that will take 14-year-olds. Most of them, it's 15 to 18. Come on. GPA, you have to be a good student, especially for the semester or year. Each country could be a little different. Japan wants you to have a 3.0. Very few programs have language requirements because let's say you want to go to Norway and hope to ski. Well, the Norwegian AFS volunteers know that these Americans don't have Norwegian in their classes in the United States, so they're going to have to learn, and we will help them learn, and we will tutor them, and, you know, once you're guaranteed that you're going to a country, even before they find a host family, you will get language materials from AFS to start learning the language. Good health, and then open to new experiences and ready for new challenges. And boy, I emphasize that and say, if you just want to go to another country and sit in your room and play video games, don't go. Stay here. That's all you're going to do, then, you know, we don't want you. You've got to be open to new experiences, ready for challenges. Okay, now, when we get done with this presentation, I have a paper up here about exchange student opportunities for American students. And these are on here as well as AFS is, because let's put it this way, we haven't heard otherwise, but the U.S. Department of State sponsors certain scholarships for American students to go abroad. The oldest one is Congress Bundestag to Germany. That started in the early 80s as Germany wanted to kind of thank the United States for helping them rebuild after the war and to, you know, foster this exchange of, you know, goodwill and getting to know each other. So this has been around since the 1980s. Yes, okay, yes abroad. I'll tell you about a little more about that in a minute. And then NISLE, again, the Department of State wants more young people to learn languages that aren't normally taught in American high schools, because I think it will be good not only for our country's businesses. You know, if you're a peach grower and you want to sell your peaches to India, and one of your employees that's in the business department happens to know Hindi, then you could send them over and let them handle the negotiations. Okay, you don't need a translator. But it's also good and valuable for our military as well. So these languages are the ones that they emphasize on this particular program. And yes, abroad, woo, not used to that. So, yeah. After 9/11, the U.S. Department of State wanted to help foster good relations between us and countries with a predominant Muslim population. And so within 2 years of 9/11, they were offering scholarships to students from other predominantly Muslim countries to come to the United States, spend their year, and then go back and, you know, share what they've learned. And it's a scholarship that is competitive. The kids are screened, and then they're awarded with these scholarships. Well, a couple of years later then, so probably the mid-2000s, the U.S. Department of State said, why don't we have American students go to countries with a predominant Muslim population? Now, the kids that come here don't have to be Muslim, and the kids that go abroad on this program from here don't necessarily stay with a Muslim host family. We had a boy from Chico about 5 or 6, was pre-pandemic, got one of these scholarships and ended up in Malaysia staying with an ethnic Chinese family, okay? And they weren't Muslim. And since Malaysia is also an English-speaking country, he really didn't have to learn another language. He learned some Malay, but it wasn't what the schools used. They used English. But then he went, came home and went to Stanford after high school. Okay, so these, I try to do these presentations in late September, early October, because the deadlines for these 3 are around November 1st to December 1st. And so if students want to apply for these, I want them to be aware of that and know, they need to do that. Okay. And then, of course, you can host an exchange student, support another student, share your culture and traditions. You don't have to host in order to study abroad, but you can do both. And make a lifelong friend to visit abroad in the future. Yeah. Okay. And then this just tells them to, because I'd still do presentations sometimes during classes at Yuba City or River Valley High. And so we have a student-parent info night after that to encourage you to come. And then that is all for that. Okay. I'll let you handle taking that out. Map of California. When the kids first arrive, we have an all-day orientation for them, unlike having 2 or 3 days like we used to, okay? And so I'll give a little geography lesson of California to them. This is our area team, and these are the students who are here this year. The blue pins are girls, the boys, and the magenta pins are girls, and then the gold pins are where we have our first 2 group orientations. But I explained to them about the Sierra Nevada on this side and the Coast Range on this side, and it takes 7 or 8 hours to drive from here clear down to Disneyland, okay? You're not just gonna, hop in a car and go to Disneyland or to the beach, and surf and all of that. So this is where they're located this year. We only have one over on the silver side, which happens to be Truckee this year. Usually we'll have 2 or 3 in Reno, but this year we didn't. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about Dixon and Dixon's future with AFS. Okay, so I know Dixon used to have a chapter. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot, particularly about Dixon. But if Dixon wanted to revive a community organization of AFS, you would still be part of the silver and gold area team, okay? But if you wanted to keep things locally involved, let's say someone from Dixon goes to the AFS website and puts in a request to be a host family now. Okay? I'm the point person and would get that with technology the way it is. And I would call them and talk to them. We could go ahead and have them apply to be a host family, match them up with a student, talk to the school about getting approval. You have to do all of those things before the student and the family is matched up. But it would be someone from Davis or Winters or Sacramento that would be the support person for that student and family. This would be if Dixon wanted to have within the community that support structure themselves, which would be fabulous. Okay. As a minimum, you should have 3 registered trained volunteers. About 12 or 15 years ago, the U.S. Department of State came out with these regulations for exchange student programs. Because there were other programs, like I said, with a paid rep that would say, oh, I'll place 10 students. And by the time the students arrive, there's only 2 of them that have been placed, and so the rest of them sleep on the living room floor. That's not how we want to treat exchange students. So the Department of State came up with these regulations that we all have to follow now. So when you are a registered AFS volunteer, you have to have a background check. Well, you fill out a short application, and it was short, right? Okay, the volunteer application is short. And then if you're a first-time volunteer, you'll have an interview with another volunteer, but it can be over the phone. And then they write down what you might be interested in helping with. Okay, and you have a background check, a criminal background check done via email, so no fingerprints or anything like that. And then you're cleared to be a registered volunteer. However, if you want to work with hosted students, you have to have 2 additional trainings done on the computer. Each one's about an hour long. And that's why I put registered trained volunteers, okay? And they'll talk about the rules for making host family placements. You know, you can't have more than 2 per family. Some families do want to host 2 at a time. And the kids can share a bedroom, but no more than 2 per bedroom, okay? You can't put 3 or 4 kids in a bedroom. These are all the rules, and you have this little test on them. Okay. Now, let's say you have your 3 registered volunteers. And you have a host family that wants to host. Yay! Okay, their application is a whole lot longer. And they have to, adults have to have background checks, again, done via email. They have to have a home interview, which has always been true. Way back in the day, an AFS volunteer would come to your house and interview your family, okay? And they also have to submit 4 references on their application that are character references, and then AFS emails those references, and you know, it takes them about 5 to 10 minutes to fill it out. It's not a big deal. Okay, so we need a host family, and then that host family will work and get a student. Then we have to get school permission. And a lot of, you know, schools still really relish having exchange students. And, you know, an AFS volunteer has to go to the school, hand them the paperwork about the student. They have to check and make sure they have their vaccinations, they have their transcript, and da-da-da-da-da. And then the school will sign permission, and then everything is done, and the family and the student can be put in touch with each other. Okay. Now, on down here. As a support person, AFS has a liaison for each student and family. And that liaison has to be one of these trained volunteers. But to be a liaison, you have to have 1 more training. So, but that one's good for 10 years. By the way, these up here, they're only good for 1 year. And so every year, I get my thing. Your 365 days is almost up. Now here you get to do your training again. But it's really, really short. It's a refresher course, okay? So that's not so bad. Okay, and then the liaison is the support person for the student and the family. Now, it would be ideal if you had another family that wanted to be a backup, emergency family. And they have to fill out the application and go through the same process as the real host family. But then, you know, who knows what would happen. You know, we've had a host dad with a heart attack. And so we moved the student for a little while the family dealt with that. But, you know, the dad recovered. We had a host family where, you know, the host dad had stashed away some illegal drugs. And the host mom said, get this girl out of here. She doesn't need to be here right now. And I didn't know he was doing this. So we had to move her right away. So having a backup family would be good. And then one volunteer to connect with the school, and that could be the liaison. Okay. A volunteer to interview the host family. Okay, so one of these 3 registered volunteers that's trained could also be the one to interview the host family. And then you could have another volunteer maybe that focuses on the sending programs. Just like my little presentation, encourage students to go abroad. And then also, if any of them do apply, to do the home interview and do the write-up for that. Okay, so that is, you know, if Dixon wanted to have a self-contained community of AFS, then that would be what would be necessary. Not everyone has to be a host family, okay? We need help too. Okay, down here at the bottom were those scholarship programs that I already mentioned. We call them sponsored programs because they're sponsored by the Department of State. Over here are the study abroad programs that I mentioned already. And then over here are the hosting programs that are scholarship programs for students coming in. Now, CBYX, Congress Bundestag, is on both sides. The YES program, okay, it's Youth Exchange and Study is what it stands for, is on both sides. But what's different is this FLEX program. This started after the fall of the Soviet Union. And the United States already had Congress Bundestag going with Germany, and they wanted to be able to bring students here to learn about America from Russia and Kazakhstan and Moldova and all of the former Soviet republics that now were independent. So that started around 1992. And it's expanded nowadays to many other countries besides the former Soviet Union. Okay? Albania, Kosovo. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. So that is kind of what I wanted to say to you Dixonites. Any questions? I would hope you would raise your hand if you had one. Well, I try. And then for hosting, like I said, you get to select your student, and we can sort students based on interest. So over here, I have some just things that I made up. I put history for one of them, okay? Kids that like history, since this is a historical society. And then musical, drama, sports. There was something else that I had. Oh, science, just for the heck of it. You know, you can do politics, you can do robotics. There's lots of things you can sort through. So if you have a particular host family in mind, see if one of those would work, okay? Okay.
Thank you very much. And I know that several of you have either hosted a student or two or three, and some of you have studied abroad. So I would like to give each of you a chance to share your personal experiences. I'm going to introduce to you Lisa Barnes McClintock, a very dear friend from my childhood, as well as Catlin. But we're going to have Lisa present her experiences with AFS.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Kim. This is really short. I just put it on a PowerPoint so that the photos were easier to see, but I don't need to talk very long. So my name is Lisa McClintock. I graduated from Dixon High in 1987. I was an exchange student my junior year of high school, which is a little bit different. And I went to Quebec, Canada. As Kim and Carol mentioned, at that time you could request where you wanted to go, but you didn't necessarily go there. Like I know Kim really wanted to go to Spain. They sent her to the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, and for me, I really wanted to go to France. I was obsessed with France since I was very young. But they sent me to Quebec, Canada, so at least I got to practice my French. And then my senior year of high school, we hosted an exchange student from Honduras. And then I've been volunteering on and off with AFS since then. So can you all see it okay? Okay. So this is my host family in Quebec. Andre, my father, Renee, my mother, and then my two younger siblings, Veronique and Jonathan. And so when I went, I was 16, and I'm the youngest in my family. I have an older brother. So that was a very different experience for me, having younger siblings. I had kind of a similar experience to Kim, where my host mom had lived in some of the English-speaking provinces of Canada because her father was in the military. So she wanted to practice her English a lot with me. But the rest of my family didn't speak English. So I think it was a couple of weeks after I'd been in, and my younger sister, Veronique, said, why are you always speaking in English? so that kind of gave the mom and I, kind of a little wake-up call, realized, okay, yeah, we need to speak in French all the time so that everyone understands. Luckily, thanks to Facebook, I lost track of my family for a little while, and then was able to reconnect. So I went it was just right before the pandemic. And so it was maybe like 2018 or 2019. I did go back to Quebec and visited with my host family. After I left in high school, they had another child, Stephanie. She's the youngest over here. And then my parents divorced, and then they moved to a different place. But I got to get reconnected with all of them. And what I loved now is that, all the kids, we're all adults now, and we have children. So it just seemed like I wasn't that much different in age anymore. So that was nice. It seems like we have so much more in common than we did back then. And my host mom, Renee, she still calls me her big daughter because I'm the oldest, which is just really sweet. She just always calls me la grande fille, and I call her Maman Renee. Anyway, so one of the other great things, which I think maybe Kim has mentioned in some of the letters that Kelly was writing, was that in addition to making friends with the students in my school, I also made some really great connections with the other AFS students. So this picture here is from other students that were living in my region. So it was kind of like about the size of like Yolo and Solano counties. So like in that area. And then my best friend, Leslie, up here in the center, we're still very good friends. She was from North Carolina. And so we were both studying in Quebec together. And after college, it was during the recession. It was hard to find a job here. So she said, come out to North Carolina. And so I did, and I stayed with her, and I got a job working at the study abroad office at UNC Chapel Hill, and started volunteering with AFS at that time, and decided, I really like working with young people. So I went back and got my teaching credential. And this past summer, we went to New York for my son's band trip, and we went up to Connecticut, where my friend Leslie is visiting now. And we all got together, and I hadn't seen her since I got married 20 years ago. And it was just like no time had passed. It was so great. Her husband's French. Actually, must be her exchange student from Switzerland or Germany was there. I think she was taking the picture, so she's not in there. But my friend Leslie also has hosted several AFS students with her family. So anyway, just these lovely experiences that last. Just feeling like I have family all over the world is just a wonderful thing about AFS. So this is my family. My senior year of high school. So the one on the left is Irma. She was our exchange student from Honduras. And we just hit it off right away. And I loved it because, as you can see, I'm the only girl in my family. I just have an older brother. And so suddenly I had a sister, and we just had so much in common and just have remained so close since then. I did go for her wedding. She wasn't able to come to mine because she was pregnant at the time. And then just in December, my mother and I flew to Texas because Irma's youngest daughter was getting her master's, so we went to her college graduation. And so again, that continues. Her older daughter is living in Panama, and she was like, oh, you should come to Panama, and we'll all hang out there. And so again, just, this built-in family all over the world is what's so great about AFS. So this is not AFS, but I feel like it's related because just the experience of going and living in another country and really getting to know the people is so important. And after I got my teaching credential, I thought, I just want to go travel somewhere. And I had missed a deadline for the Fulbright program to go to Europe. So I applied for the JEB program and taught English in Japan for a few years. So this is my my boss from the time that I lived there, and his wife, and they were just such beautiful people, wonderful people. They came to our wedding. And their two children here were students of mine because I taught at 3 different junior high schools in the town. And they've both come to visit. And the younger son is very outgoing, very unlike, I think, our stereotypes of Japanese people. And he spent quite a bit of time. This is an old picture when the kids were small. But they just think of him as part of the family. And it just seems so normal that we have family in Japan and Honduras and in Canada. And while they haven't yet, Carol asked me if they were interested in AFS. I have mentioned it many times. They have not yet, but I was really pleased when my older son befriended a kid from Austria last year. So I've been trying to push him to hey, go visit your friend in Austria, go travel around. Maybe there's still hope for my younger son. But anyway, just thanks again. I feel like we were students during the golden age of AFS here in Dixon, the 80s. And so just thanks so much. I noticed the Joneses are here. I remember having many events at their house when the other exchange students in the region would come, and we would get together, and just wonderful memories. So thank you so much.
So I'm Catlin O'Halloran Heller. This is my dad, Tom Burton. And we are going to talk about 2 of our AFS students.
Right. First of all, though, my experience with the AFS goes all the way back to the very first AFS student, which was Ake Ekstam from Sweden, in the class of the graduating class of '57, and then in the early '80s, my wife and I were the host family for a daughter from Belgium. And then in the early 90s, we were the host family, for a daughter from Norway. And I have 2 Belgian daughters and 2 Belgian granddaughters and 1 Belgian grandson that's about a year old now, I think. Yeah. And we haven't seen him yet, so. Yeah. And then I have a Norwegian daughter and 3 Norwegian granddaughters. So, yep. Big family.
Yes, that's right. That's right. All right. First of all, I was going to tell you, Carol, that Kwan Ho, I actually worked with her in Solano County in the early 90s. So just funny coincidence story there. So yeah, we hosted, I was in 8th grade when my parents told us that we were getting a new sister, only it wasn't that kind of new sister, it was a host, we were hosting a family, or hosting a sister, and that was from 1981 to 82. We hosted Liva Hienes, and she was from Belgium. Like I said, I was an 8th grader. She was in her gap year, 1 year past high school. And so all of a sudden, I wasn't the older sister anymore, which wasn't maybe my favorite thing. But Liva and I actually became very close over the years. When she was in high school, we both were in the Sound of Music production at the high school. I was one of the Von Trapp children, and she was one of the nuns, which was funny because she was an atheist and also Belgian. So, but yeah, you take who you have. Couple of my favorite memories, as one of the things my dad is not super fond of is that we sang a lot in the car going on road trips, like to Disneyland. Sang all the time. As most of you know my mother, so clearly we were singing, yeah. And Liva joined right in, only she didn't have a great voice, but she had a loud voice. And so she sang a lot with us. When she was, she's told me this many times over the years, in the sort of story about how in the 80s kids came over, they really didn't have much contact with their families after that. You know, you could write letters on that light blue Aeropostal paper, and there was like a Christmas phone call and a Mother's Day phone call or something. So when her group got on the plane to come to the United States, somehow, somewhere, I don't know if they played it on the plane or they're playing it in the airport, the John Denver song, Leavin' on a Jet Plane. And they all just cried and cried and cried. And then they did it to him again on the way back. So now they're leaving the United States and they're playing that song. To this day, she can't hear that song without visibly tearing up because of all the emotions around that song. So that was, so then later when I was I was actually out of college. Katrina Brecka was staying here from Norway with another Dixon family, and my mom was the liaison. And through the conversations, it turned out that Katrina's family wasn't working for her. And so my mom said, temporarily, until we find you a new placement, come live with my husband and I. And that became a permanent year-long residence. She did her year with my folks as well. And then when we have reunited with them several times. Yeah, we've been to Belgium a handful of times, and in about, I was trying to think if it was 2008 or 2009, probably 2008, 9 of us, so my sister and her children, and then my former husband and my son and I, and my folks, all went over, 8 of us, I guess, all went over to France. We spent a week in Paris, and then we reunited with the Norwegian family and the Belgian family in Provence. So we spent another week on a little compound together, all of us, and it was, reservations for 17 at dinner because of the families. And so we had a great time doing that with them. And then Liva, the original AFS student, her oldest daughter came and stayed for 2 weeks with my folks, just during the summer 1 year. And not to be outdone, her younger daughter said she also wanted to come, but she wanted to come stay with me, and she wanted to come for 3 months. So she came for 3 months, 2 different times. She taught with the Dixon the Dixon High School dance team. She's a dancer, so she taught them. She had her own sort of like made-up exchange program that she created for herself. And then when later, last 2 years ago, a couple of years ago.
Well, Liva was here last.
No, not Liva. Before that. No, before that. Leila and Axel.
They came and
and
stayed with me.
yes, they and Layla, who's one of the so Liva's daughter is Layla, announced that she was pregnant. So that was where the great grandbaby generation came in. And then when my mom was ill in last 2023, Liva came again and not only got to say goodbye to my mom, which was very important and very special for her, but also got to attend my wedding, which was also very important and special for me. So, so that was really nice. The other thing I was going to say was Katrina's family came right before the pandemic. We knew my mom was ill, and we wanted to make sure they could say goodbye if they wanted to. And Katrina came before the pandemic with her children, and she has 3 little girls, adorable little girls.
Oh, man.
They speak. They begin to learn English in school, but the littlest one had just started. She was maybe a kindergartner. She just started school, so her older sisters taught her hello and goodbye and please and thank you, and she would carefully try out those words in English. And then when they were playing one time in my backyard with my dog, when my dog has the ball, I have a small dog, and when she has the ball, we tell her to drop it. Drop it. And so those were her sort of her 6th and 7th English words were drop it, she would say. So it was very cute. The thing that I love most about our experience with AFS was our multi-generational relationships that we've created. And as you spoke to, having family all over the world, but just having multi-generations of people who we know, love, who come to our home, who tell us, hey, can I come in August? And we say, of course, sure. Right? Come on over, and who we've been to visit as well. So anything else you want to add?
No.
All right. That's it. That's all we've got. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Where in Norway was your exchange student from Norway?
Do you remember where she was?
I was just curious because I went.
She's in Oslo now, but she wasn't from Oslo originally.
They're south of Oslo,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
down on the peninsula down there.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it by Christiansburg then?
Where?
Christiansburg?
Was it by Christiansburg?
No.
No.
Stavern, I think. Is
Oh,
the-
that's right. Yeah, Stavern. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like Kim, our Belgian AFS student was from the Dutch-speaking part of, a Flemish part of, in there. Yeah, well, that's the French that they call the Wallons. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And there's a connection there. I can share really quickly.
Okay.
So there's a connection. Leva Jeans, or Haynes, her street in Belgium, the neighbors on the same street hosted an American student the same year I went abroad, and her name was Susie Winford. She was from LA, and Susie and I got to know each other at the orientation. And so I went to visit Susie, and I got to see Leva in that same year. Yes. And what's really interesting is we now, well, Tom and Maramy sold their home to us. And before Tom and Maramy, my great aunt sold the house to them. So it's like going full circle. Yeah. And another interesting story is the Williams family, who has Dixon Florist. They also hosted a student from Belgium. And while I was a student abroad, I got to see the Williams in Belgium visiting their student. So there's a picture of me with my host parents and what were their names again? Jean Williams and Joe. And Joe Williams and his wife. Joe and Jean Williams. And so the 5 of us are standing there in Belgium. So all Dixon mini reunion. So yeah. Well, thank you. Did you want to share about your experience?
Yeah, no, I'll be quick. I was just curious. I went to Norway. I was actually the first student to go abroad through AFS. And just for the summer. I was there for 2 months. I was in a little town in the Gudbrandsdal Valley of Norway, which is straight up, the train track goes straight up the middle, about a third of the way up Dover. It didn't stop in Dover. The town was a grocery store where I could go in the afternoons and buy a Kroner ice, which was a ice cream cone. But I stayed. It was absolutely fantastically beautiful. So, iceberg came straight down the middle of Norway and cut this very steep valley that is beautiful. The family I stayed with had a farm which their family acquired in 1400. But the house that was there now was built around the turn of around 1900. So there was a farm, and the oldest son had to, by tradition, custom, had inherited the farm, which he didn't really want to do because he was a poet, and he had won local contests, but he did. And then one of the younger children, one of his younger brothers, was just starting a lodge that summer that was like 4,000 feet up way above the tree line. And he would get groups there during the summer. And AFS, when the students in Norway would gather together, we all went up there, but I went up there before. So I spent half of my time on the farm and half of my time up in I call it a lodge, up in the mountains, where he would take groups, like some were little kids, some were college students, and some were AFS students, and would stay for a week or two. And there was a wedding up there that I went to also. The ceremony was at the Lutheran church in the valley, and the reception, and it was an all-nighter. People slept the next day, but both were interesting. I worked on the farm with a scythe, cutting the hay, throwing the hay on top of a wagon that was pulled by a horse. But I didn't have to, but I liked it. It was fun. And then in the afternoons, I'd go get my Kroner ice. And there was a young woman who was in a school in Oslo, learning like home economics, I guess we'd call it. She had done what would you call an internship or something at the Norwegian embassy in the Soviet Union, but she was home for the summer, and she taught me Norwegian grammar. But I really learned to speak Norwegian when I was up at the lodge, because I would hang out with 2 or 3 women who worked there and prepared the meals and changed the beds, and we'd sit around a tub and I'd peel potatoes with them, and they only spoke Norwegian. So, but one thing that was interesting to me, I learned, as everybody who's spoken has, new ways of doing things. The food was different. Big meal was in the middle of the day, and breakfast and supper were very similar, lots of cheeses and flatbread. But they took me, the war was very real to them still. This was 57, the summer of 57, and they had been invaded. There was a lot of anti-Swedish sentiment because the Nazi Germans had marched through Sweden and came down Norway from the north. They took me, and there was a resistance in Norway. The particular family I was with wasn't really part of the resistance. They were just lying low. But I learned about it from other people. But they took me, the family I was with took me to the next town in the valley, where there was a statue of a Russian soldier, because they were liberated. They were liberated by the Russian army. And that was, it was kind of shocking to see for me, coming from getting quite a propaganda, frankly, in the Dixon elementary and high school, at that time, the history department was, as far as I'm concerned, was absolutely terrible. But it was extremely anti-communist, and it was taught by people that weren't historians. They were, well, I should just not mention who it was, but they weren't historians. But anyway, and and so here, my family was admiring. It was important for me to see that statue, and that kind of opened my mind a lot. And so it's just an example of, it's good for people to be with people who have a different perspective than you do, and helps you think about things. So that's all. I mean, there's lots I could say about Norway, and the family has come several times, and I've only been there once since, but they had cousins in Modesto who were farmers in the Modesto area, so they had a second reason, but they'd always stop by and see me. I lived in San Francisco for 20 years, so they'd see me there, and then they'd come to the ranch. Yes.
One thing that I noticed about being in Norway was that out in the rural area, all the farms looked like the equipment and the barns and everything looked like it was painted that day. I mean, everything was neat and clean.
No, it was very neat and clean, and the house was beautiful, actually. I did bring a few pictures. It was built by someone in the family, and it was very much Norwegian style. But yeah, it was very, it was all very neat and tidy. I agree with you there, yeah. And they farmed every square inch of the property that they owned, yeah. Just briefly, I'll say my family here also hosted Ron Frew, who many of you have probably visited. And how I developed, all of us in the family loved Ron. And I was only there, I was in college when he came, but I was there, vacations and whatever. But so that was a wonderful relationship. But I think many of you have visited Ron, and he's still taking visitors. He wrote a few notes here, but we're running out of time, so I'll leave it for other people. Okay. Oh, Peter went, my brother went to Denmark, yeah.
And of course, that's back when you couldn't choose your country.
No, you could not. The other thing I'd like to say is I went by boat. I think Peter did too, and it took 10 days to get across. It was an old freighter. They told us it was an old freighter. And on the way over, we were in steerage, I guess, in college. I was in the bottom part of the boat. But on the way back, I had a cabin. but no, and we had a terrible storm in the middle. But anyway, I liked that boat experience because there were talks all the way across, and on the way back, then you could hear about other people's experiences.
So were you swimming in the Mid-Atlantic Ocean?
No, I wasn't one of the ones crawling through the porthole. Here you go.
Would you read what Ron sent you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's. I'll read parts of it. It's kind of long. He also grew up in a small town in New Zealand. His father was a farmer. He describes Dixon. I'm trying to think what to pick out. He talks about being picked up at the airport, leaving San Francisco on a 3-lane each-way highway, driving to Dixon, then going to a 2-lane, then a 1-lane, still paved, then a farm track. in a downpour. I don't remember that. I mean, we all went to pick him up, but downpour in August, mid-August, that's very unusual, as everybody around here knows. And then my father at that time had a thriving sheep business, and so he had employees, and a couple of them were stuck in the mud in front of us, and so they were in the process of pulling themselves out. So Ron says, I was definitely not going to Hollywood. He talks in the preface about being excited because they'd watched Hollywood movies all their growing up years. And then, yeah, he says Dixon High was a small agricultural town, which population at that time was 2,000. And so, yeah, and he describes Dixon, which we all, this, you know, if this were being given to another group, but we all know Dixon. I mean, Dixon at that time was much more a farming town than it is now. I mean, it was a farming town. Dixon provided grocery stores and churches and bars, I guess, you know. But he claims it changed his life. The people of Dixon, which at that time had a population of a little over 2,000, were incredibly kind and welcoming to me. The U.S. at that time was reasonably egalitarian. Around here it was, but not everywhere. And very prosperous with a can-do attitude, a sizable middle class, and Republicans and Democrats mixed freely. That was nice. I would like to record my undying gratitude to those AFS volunteers who've kept this life-changing opportunity open to many New Zealand teenagers. He and my brother bonded like they became during their lifetime. I can't even count the number of times they have each gone back and forth, and they were extremely close. Ron has called me many, many times since my brother died a year ago, just because we're both old now, and you know. But it was my brother that he was most attached to, and my mother. Where he said something, but he says I've had 60 other high school friends and family associates have come to visit me, and his children have gone to Argentina and Brazil. Yeah, Brazil and Argentina, a couple of his children went. He also says it's his relationship with my family and just coming to Dixon that caused him to go to college, which he did. Although then, when his father was ready to sell his farm, Ron bought it and has become an extremely successful farmer in New Zealand. He's bought many acres since then. But yeah, that became a very close and wonderful relationship for everyone in my family and lots of Dixon. So yeah, thank you very much. And
God, it's 4:30. It's supposed to quit. Okay, I'll get to. Mary Ellen and I have hosted 2 one-year students, a German girl, Garrett, and a Belgian boy, Cedric. We have 4 children. 3 of them have gone on AFS tours, 2 of them for a year and 1 for a summer. Now, Lisa was the oldest. She did the summer trip to Brazil, and it was a wonderful time. She was treated like a queen the whole time, and she learned all of them learned the languages where they went. And you're talking about 3 months and learned Portuguese. The next one, Lori, went to Indonesia. They told her, you are very adventurous and you should go to an adventurous place. They were right about all of that, but it wasn't necessarily a pleasant experience living in a strict Muslim family. She did something offensive to them. They wouldn't tell her what it was. It was as simple as a couple of teenage girls laying on the floor watching TV. She got up and stepped over the other girl to go get something. She showed her the bottom of her foot, and that cut it. From then on, the family wouldn't talk to her. They'd prepare the meal. She'd come in, and they'd all get up and leave. They wouldn't tell her what was wrong. So as time went on, then she went with another family. But the whole thing was she felt there wasn't supervision to intervene or explain what was going on or anything. That was, then our son went to Latvia. He had to make a decision right away. Do I learn Russian or do I learn Latvia? And he decided to learn Russian because in the world that was probably a lot more common language. And that was truly a third world country. And a lot of different things went on. I think his experience was a little bit rough, but it still was a positive thing for him. When you were talking about Ron Frew, I was a good friend of Ron Frew's. One of my favorite stories about him, Ron came and he tried to get involved with everything. He was a very outgoing guy. Started playing football. He wasn't that good at it, but he was playing football. And we had a couple of weeks of practice, and then our first game was an away game. So they had to sign up for a Reuters bus. Ron opens his eyes and says, "My God, you got a Reuters bus? Why are we playing football?" In New Zealand, if you were going out and having sex with your girlfriend, you were rooting. So years later, when we went down to visit him, I got on the phone and I found the closest Roto-Rooter people, and I says, "Do you have a hat or T-shirt with the Rooter on it?" And I started to tell him why. I says, "I know what you're calling about. You come over here and there'll be a stack of hats for you on the secretary's desk." And there was. So when I went to Ron's house, I set all those hats there. Said Mr. Rooter. They were gone in about 30 minutes. All his sons come through, everybody grabbed that. So anyway, we had a lot of, we did go to Belgium and visited Cedric and his family. And so, and actually, Garrett, we've tried to keep in touch, and our daughter was great friends with her, and it seems like she's dropped off the face of the earth. We don't know what she's doing or what happened. So anyway, we also hosted a whole lot of those bus trip things, and so we had a lot of experience.
And I believe Faye spent a summer.
Right, she did a summer program All the things that were said today certainly rang true in our family. Faye was an AFS exchange student to Holland, and the family that she was with, we've maintained friendship ever since she was there. Faye passed away about 4 years ago, but we have a lasting relationship with that family, and I think all the words that were said about changing life, I think Faye's life changed forever after being there, and it's an extremely important program, and I think Dixon was wonderful support for her and coming back, and then all the visits back and forth over the years have meant a great deal to all of us. So thank you all very much.
I remember when she came back, yeah.